This is a special presentation from WENY News. The Dream Lives On. Brought to you by LECOM.
Hello and welcome to our special presentation, The Dream Lives On. Every year, WENY News and Lilly Broadcasting pay tribute to the civil rights icon, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King spent almost 2 decades fighting for racial and social justice, civil rights, calling for freedom and equal protection for all. His career began as a young Baptist minister before evolving into an activist and political figure with a mission for equal rights for all Black Americans. His first leadership role in what would become the American Civil Rights Movement was in 1955 in Montgomery, Alabama. His efforts would continue to grow, and he was a national figure for the advancement of civil rights until his assassination on April 4th, 1968. And Dr. Martin Luther King's travels even brought him to upstate New York. In 1960, he visited Ithaca to deliver a sermon at Sage Chapel on Cornell University's campus. A year later, Dr. King returned to Ithaca to speak at a fundraiser at Bailey Hall. In 2009, the City of Ithaca Freedom Walkway Committee developed a walkway through the city in honor of Dr. King and the city's Black history. WENY's Alexander Duran went on a tour of the south side loop of the walkway.
I'm here with Leslyn McBean Claiborne to start our tour of the Southside MLK Freedom Walkway. We begin at the MLK statue on the Ithaca Commons.
Leslyn McBean Claiborne came to Ithaca in 1990 and became very interested in Ithaca's Black history. In 2005, she became the chair of the Ithaca Freedom Walkway Committee and hit the ground running to develop a physical trail, shining a light on key markers in the city.
We felt that the Ithaca Commons was a place that so many people came to that we wanted to make sure that our Black history, and especially an icon of our Black history, is represented here, and one who came to Ithaca. Martin Luther King Jr. came to Ithaca, came to Cornell University, and so we were excited about celebrating that.
The statue of Dr. King is the starting and ending point for the south side and north side loops of the walkway. We took a quick detour at the former Merchants Bank to look at one important stop on the north side loop before visiting the south side.
It was a stop on the Underground Railroad, and we did put up a plaque for the bicentennial of Tompkins County for this.
On the south side loop, McBean Claiborne emphasizes the importance of the 190-year-old St. James AME Zion Church on Cleveland Avenue. The church is a National Historic Landmark for not only being an Underground Railroad station, but also a place where soldiers enlisted between 1863 and 1864 to fight in the Civil War.
I mean, these were 26 men from Tompkins County who enlisted to fight in the Civil War and a fight for our freedom. The very thing that Martin Luther King several years later was fighting for in the Civil Rights Movement.
McBean Claiborne says many of the soldiers came back to live on Cleveland Avenue when the war ended.
There was so much, and on this street we will have celebrations of Black life and Black, history and Black love.
Further down the street is the Forest City Lodge, known as the Black Elks Lodge, where many Black stars would perform in the 1950s. And around the block, ending the South Side Loop, is the Southside Community Center, a place for gathering, education, learning skills, and support.
It stands here because it faces out onto Cleveland Avenue, which I shared with you earlier, is where so much happened. It's where the Black people live, and so many things happened on this street that was about Black progression, Black life, Black history, Black love, Black everything.
We have completed our tour of the south side of the MLK Freedom Walkway, and Leslyn tells me this represents hope for unity, freedom, and justice for all. Reporting from Ithaca, Alexander Dern, WENY News.
Less than a week before his assassination, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered a Sunday sermon at the Washington National Cathedral. And unknown to King and those in attendance, it would be his last sermon ever. WENY Washington correspondent Brendan Scanlon reports on the historic final Sunday sermon.
This is the Washington National Cathedral. It's well known for its neo-Gothic architecture, stunning stained glass, and rich history. It's also an integral piece of the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
In front of the Washington National Cathedral sits a very large pulpit where Dr. Martin Luther King gave his final Sunday sermon in March of 1968.
To have the opportunity of standing in this very great and significant pulpit.
From this Canterbury pulpit on March 31st, 1968, King delivered his sermon titled Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution.
We stand in the most segregated hour of America.
It was an uneasy time. There was war going on.
It was the height of the Civil Rights era and the Vietnam War. Canon Missioner Reverend Leonard Hamlin says it was a crucial time for U.S. decision makers.
What are the decisions that really reflected the democratic principles, the kind of reputation that the country wanted to hold in the world?
Mankind must put an end to war. A war will put an end to mankind.
The sermon centered around unifying and staying present during the fight for civil rights, economic prosperity, and peace.
But having his voice here presented an opportunity not only for the country to move forward, but even for some just to begin to consider how we live together, work together, and build a community together.
The world in which we live is geographically one.
5 days after King's sermon, a memorial service was held at the cathedral following his assassination in Memphis.
No one was anticipating that would take place or how it would affect the country. We all struggle at times to be present in every moment. So in that moment, were we really listening to his sermon about staying awake?
Reverend Hamlin believes King's message is just as important now as it was over 55 years ago.
To engage each other, to build relationships with each other, to love one another, to really not just have it in word, but to make sure that we are turning those words into action.
Reporting in Washington, Brendan Scanlon, WENY News.
And Dr. King's legacy has been remembered and honored in many ways. Streets, buildings, libraries named after him to honor him. But artists are also celebrating his work and legacy through art. WENY Washington correspondent Rachel Knapp reports.
Around Washington, D.C., you can find references to the civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., many of which honor him through art. In the National Portrait Gallery, there's a bust of Dr. King and their Struggle for Justice exhibit. In the U.S. Capitol Rotunda, where statues and busts of former presidents stand, also includes a bust of Dr. King. But one of the most recognizable pieces of art in D.C. is along the National Mall, the MLK Memorial.
This is the first major memorial on the National Mall to an individual who wasn't a president.
The National Park Service and D.C. history enthusiasts say this memorial has many layers of symbolism.
It's inspired by a line from his speech at the March on Washington, that out of the mountain of despair, a stone of hope. So visitors, when they arrive, they come through the very narrow opening, which represents the mountain of despair. And of course, Dr. King's likeness is carved 30 feet into the air on the representative stone of hope.
The address, 1964 Independence Avenue, references the year the Civil Rights Act of 1964 became law. Even nature plays a unique role in this memorial. We're told the nearby plants represent sacrifice, hope, and legacy. Park Service and tour guides hope people take the time to read the quotes from Dr. King along the memorial because his teachings and work are still relevant today as they were decades ago.
Because you can get a perspective of his mind and the leadership he had at such a young age. One of my favorite quotes is the second one on the left-hand side, and it says, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." You can adopt that philosophy in every part of life, and if you just use that approach, I think the world will be slightly better.
In Washington, D.C., Rachel Knapp, WENY News.
And many of Dr. King's quotes still hold meaning today, whether they were delivered in a sermon or to a crowd of thousands. His words continue to inspire change. When we return, our tribute to the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. continues, sharing one of his most famous speeches, sharing his dream for civil and economic rights. We'll be right back.
The dream lives on. We'll return in a moment.